Well, good afternoon and welcome to today's session, Designing Resilience. We're grateful that you made it today. My name is Bill Larson, and I'm one of the co-chairs. I'm also the chairman of the Pacific Northwest Building Resilience Coalition. And I share the co-chairmanship from the private industry side with Evan Reese, who is the executive director of the U.S. Resiliency Council. And Evan's with us virtually. Evan, you can hear us? I hope.
I can,
Okay.
and I'm looking
There he is.
forward
Okay,
to,
great. We're grateful that we have another co-chair who's recently joined us, and this is from the elected official side. We're fortunate to have Washington State Representative Brandy Donahue, and Brandy's going to be our co-chair. As you can see, she's a champion for resilience, has experience in the emergency preparedness and response field, and I'd like to invite you to say a couple words, and thank you for joining us.
Okay, sure. Yeah, my name is Brandy Donahue. I'm state rep here in Washington in the 44th Legislative District. It's about 20 miles north of here. I have had a pretty big focus in my life on preparedness, response, resilience since I served in the military. And I have been working on legislation that helps our Department of Emergency Management ensure that we are in a good position to help support community members when we have a major disaster. I've done legislation surrounding URMs to try to identify exactly what areas we have that will not have standing structures if we have a major disaster, et cetera. And I am not a doomsday prepper. However, I believe in being exceptionally prepared, and I'm happy to be here.
I'd like to ask our speakers to just take a moment and introduce themselves and tell us just a little bit about your background.
Good afternoon. My name is Bridget Dooney. I am with USI Insurance Risk Services, and I am a senior property casualty consultant. I have about 25 years in construction insurance, and so I'm a construction specific insurer. I also have a lifetime of that. My father was also in this industry, so kind of carrying the torch forward. I was one of those people that didn't go to ball games. I hung out on bridge spans. So I'm happy to be able to be here and talk to people about how the risk management industry is transitioning a little from the reactive to proactive, and looking forward to talking with you all.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Goupil. I am the Chief Resilience Officer at the American Society of Civil Engineers. I am a licensed design professional in the great state of Colorado, and I'm really happy to be here as a guest at this very amazing event where this is an audience I don't necessarily interact with that frequently. So I'm happy to share some from the design community side for you today. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Hertzfeld, and I am a person that doom scrolled way too far into the worst case scenario for earthquakes and somehow made a career out of it. I'm an urban planner by background, and I work for the city of Seattle. I was hired to help create a mandatory retrofit program for the city's 1,100 collapse hazard buildings.
Thank you. Evan, could you please introduce yourself to our guests?
Sure. My name is Evan Reese. I'm sorry I could not be in there in person. I have attended several of the PennWar events in states and provinces, and I've always really enjoyed it. I am a structural engineer. I live and work down in the San Francisco Bay Area. I did a lot of earthquake seismic retrofit and design following the Loma Prieta earthquake back in 1989, and in 2011 founded the U.S. Resiliency Council as a nonprofit organization designed to really sort of promote, advocate for resilient building design. So I'm just happy to be on this great panel.
Great. Thank you, Evan. Well, first of all, you've heard probably resilience designed and defined many times today. And it basically, from a building's perspective, it's the opportunity and the capacity of a building or a structure to endure some kind of a shock, recover from it, and then keep on in its service. And this is from a perspective of natural disasters as well as man-made challenges that happen. So for today, that's kind of where we're going to be keeping our conversations going. We have been, we're very grateful that we're now working on putting together the working group, which was formerly the Disaster Resilience Working Group. And we want to work on and complement the work that they've done. And then we want to kind of like embody some forward-looking opportunities and create designing for resilience. So we're looking at creating an infrastructure that's a little bit more robust by promoting both the integration of public and private sector collaboration and innovation. So that's where we're going to look from this perspective. So we've created a prototype that is based on 3 collaborative panels. We have the planning and prevention, which if you think back, that's where that disaster preparedness and disaster response program mostly is. They'll be involved in mitigation, a lot of problem solving and solutions for risk reduction. The new design and construction part of it will be involved in new construction, new design, engineering, architecture, and mitigation there also. And now we finally also had the opportunity to talk about risk management and finance, which is some of the most important things that are happening in our area here in the region. In down south, you've heard of insurers leaving states and reducing and removing some of the products that they had. We're hopeful that we can start to get ahead of this, create some great policies, and start to put risk management and finance back and try and even the load and the balance so that costs aren't so high. We can define risk and they have a better opportunity to understand what it is that they're insuring. Each of these programs will have their own panel with a project lead. They'll have a multi-year plan of action and also have target deliverables. We've got a program that we've got on paper. It's a little difficult to share it with a group like this with the time that we had, so we just kind of go over some of the highlights. This is what it looks like. And the reason it's formed in that shape is the fact that we want these to be collaborative panels. We want them working within each other's panels and giving ideas, sharing ideas, and exchanging the information that we have. We're going to be looking at a lot of, identifying a lot of the hazard information. Where do these things happen? What's the frequency and what's the damage usually? We have that information as an industry, and even as governments, we have that. So we want to pool this all together and make sure that this is a collaborative model that works and continues to keep working. First of all, from the planning and prevention side, I just want to kind of walk in and tell you a little bit of things that we're working with. But this is where the risk reduction strategies will be coming from. As you know, in our region here, we have 2 subduction zones. We have the Cascadia subduction zone and the Alaska Aleutian subduction zone, which has had recent activity. And so this is where we'll start looking to build some of these risk reduction strategies. We're looking at going over building code enforcement, and I think you'll be delighted to hear about the codes today and some of the things you probably don't know about building codes, and enforcing engineering standards that reduce hazard impacts. Another thing to understand is that we've got a lot of old buildings in our cities, not uncommon anywhere as you look at some of these older cities. I was strolling through Seattle the other day and I noticed, as they have the stamp on the side of the wall, 1932, 1938. And these are remarkable things. So we're going to be developing some mitigation and figuring out how to share the cost of bringing things up to code, if we will. And over there, anybody who's working in mitigation and in resilience sees this. This is from the National Institute of Building Sciences. And basically, it's a benefit-cost relationship, which proves the fact that, number one, mitigation is costly, but it's not as costly as if you didn't do anything and then you have to go back and rebuild or reconstruct or repair. So these are some of the returns that you see, which is kind of an interesting opportunity that we have, and the different hazards are colored for us there. One of the big things that we're going to be talking about is retrofitting some of the pre-modern code structures to come up and meet today's code standards and or close to the code standards. And we're grateful. We have Amanda Hertzfeld today, who's the program manager for the Unreinforced Masonry Retrofit Project in Seattle. And she's going to be giving us a presentation about the program that she's working on in Seattle. So grateful for you, Dan. Appreciate that very much. When you look from the design and construction perspective, This is where we'll be working with the codes, both the Canadian and the US codes, assessing the different types of hazard effects that we'll be dealing with. This is where we'll be working primarily investment for prevention rather than recovery and repair all the time. So this is something that I think we'll see a lot of things going. This is where the engineers, the architects, the societies of engineers, so we'll have all sorts of contractors, building materials. It's the vision for it. And we're looking for adoption and enforcement of building codes, which is, I think you'll be delighted to hear about today, and also looking for technology-driven and proven solutions. So I think we have a lot of information that will be coming out of this group, and we're grateful that we have Jennifer Goupil here today from the ASCE. I had an opportunity to be on a panel with Jennifer back at MIT about a month and a half ago. She's got some great information, so she's going to share that with us today. And finally, from the risk management perspective, that first bullet point shouldn't be any kind of a new fact or startling fact that the government is basically the largest spender on disaster recovery. So what we're trying to do is trying to build a system where risk is distributed evenly and resilience is rewarded. We have a lot of times our cost goes to the owner, or cost goes to people who are like leasing the facilities. Now we're going to try and work on things so that we can have this risk and this cost that it's going to cost to owners and developers and lenders spread out evenly as we start working on different types of opportunities to increase and improve resilience. So we'll be doing a policy that we do develop should be integrated with insurance, finance, tax incentives for proactive resilience. And we'll be coordinating development of resilience rating systems. This is something that USRC has been working on. And the big thing here is the fact that we need to have the insurance industry and the insurance industry and the lenders right on top of this and working with our other groups. So we're grateful that we have Bridget here today, and she's going to be working on this and helping us with her program, partnering to create a more sustainable and impermeable world. And finally, Evan will be working to giving us a presentation about building sustainable communities through resilient design. Excuse me. Thank you. This is a list of the stakeholder groups that we've been putting together. And as you'll see, it's kind of a comprehensive list, but we're looking at it very closely to try and find out how this matches up with what our program wants to be. On the planning and prevention side, you can see we have a lot of the federal groups, state groups, provincial groups. From a design and construction, this is where our engineers and our structural people, our architectural people, federal, state employees, and provincial appointed officials, excuse me. And then the risk management and finance, we have the owners, investors, lenders, homeowner organizations, excuse me, and such. And this is the stakeholder map that we're working on. And I think this is a very important thing. We have a lot of different items to fill in there and find out about whom we're going to be inviting to work with us, because we're hoping to really encourage members to join us that can foster resilience as a cultural part of their culture. If they're not doing it from their businesses, we're not worried or not concerned or thinking that they could probably do it with us. So we're going to be spending a lot of time on this one. So finally, I appreciate very much your attention. Thank you for your support. And I'd like to invite Amanda to jump in and start off with her presentation about the URM project.
Not advancing. Oh, okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming to the last presentation of the day as we're getting the slides up. I mentioned that my role with the city of Seattle is to develop a fully resourced program to support the retrofit of collapse hazard buildings. And I'm going to get into that in just a minute. But I do want to just say before I came to the city of Seattle, I've been there for about 3 years. I worked for FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, for over a decade, where I did risk assessment, mapping, and planning, as well as response to a number of earthquakes and tsunami events. And this issue is very near and dear to my heart. So a quick earthquake 101 before we dive into things. This is the USGS seismic hazard map. And as you can see, California is obviously a very high seismic hazard, but we all knew that. But what you probably didn't know is that every single state in the United States has a seismic hazard. And there are 27 high hazard seismic states in the US. And Washington state happens to be the second most vulnerable outside of Washington. One of the things that I've heard while I've been here is mention of the Cascadia corridor. It's Cascadia, as in the Cascadia subduction zone, and the Cascade Range. So our mountain range is beautiful, but they're volcanoes, right? They are created from the Cascadia subduction zone. And earthquake hazards in the state are not only in Western Washington. They do expand into Eastern Washington. And I'll also say that the Cascadia subduction zone, well, the media likes to grab a hold of that as the really big one. It's not our most probable event. So the 2001 Nisqually earthquake that hit Western Washington is a much more probable scenario. And Western Washington has a almost 90% chance of experiencing a similar damaging earthquake within the next 50 years. So that will happen in our lifetime. And I will emphasize that while the seismic hazard on the central and eastern side of the state is not as high as the western side, it does not take a lot of shaking to knock down an unreinforced masonry building. So what is an unreinforced masonry building? I'm going to be talking about this a lot. We call them URMs for short because it's kind of a mouthful. But these are your classic vintage red brick building. They're identifiable by their arched windows, or what we call header courses. So in this middle picture on the top here, you can see there's the bricks going the long ways, and then there's the occasional row of them going the short ways. That's all that's holding these buildings up, is the brick and mortar. There is no frame behind them. So that means they are very resistant to fires, which is why they were built, right? But they are very brittle when it comes to lateral movement. And I'll also emphasize that these buildings, we have known since 1933 in the United States that these are collapse hazard buildings in an earthquake. There was an earthquake in California in 1933 that caused multiple schools to collapse and killed a number of people. I will also emphasize that these buildings are found in our most historic neighborhoods, in our quaint, charming, historic old towns, right? Like these were built near ports. They were built near railways. These were our first buildings of cities. And so these buildings are also important to preserve. So, well, earthquakes themselves are unpredictable. The performance of a URM building in an earthquake is very predictable. These pictures on the left are showcasing damages in Seattle from earthquakes in 1949, in 1965, and in 2001. And if you do the math on that, you'll realize we are very well in the window of opportunity for the next earthquake. In an earthquake, the parapet, or the part of the roof line that extends above the roof, that can fall outwards into the street, injuring pedestrians and vehicles passing by. In a higher intensity or longer duration earthquake, the walls and the floors can actually separate, causing the building to collapse. And this image on the right is from Christchurch in their 2011 earthquake. And this is where a URM building collapsed into the street onto a city bus, and it killed all but one occupant of this vehicle. So the point that I am trying to make here is that these buildings are incredibly vulnerable in an earthquake. And it's a public safety issue. It's a life safety issue. But it's also, for the context of this conference, it's also a supply chain issue, and it is a resilience issue. Christchurch, New Zealand, after their earthquake, they spent around $25 billion in recovery. So it's not just the URM itself that is that causes impacts. So in an earthquake, the building is shut down when it's damaged, and a radius around that building is cordoned off to prevent it from collapsing and killing people in an aftershock. And this bottom image that you see is from the Christchurch 2011 earthquake, and that is the evolution of closures of their central business district. And you can see over a year later, there is still part of that central business district closed. So earlier today, we heard someone say, cargo finds the path of least resistance. There's a lot of resistance here. If that cargo is going to find a new path, it might not return. So this really is an economic issue in addition to a public safety and a life safety issue. The Nisqually earthquake, not Nisqually, there's a study that came out a couple years back about, it was by USGS and FEMA about the average annualized loss of earthquakes. And so this is looking at just property damage, and Washington is at $1.2 billion. So I will emphasize that $1.2 billion is only the building stock. It doesn't include debris removal. It doesn't include lives lost. It doesn't include sheltering or long-term recovery, and it doesn't include economic losses. So I think the point that I am trying to make here is that seismic retrofits will reduce economic downtime. They will reduce losses from displaced workers, as well as disruption of supply chains. Studies show, Bill showed that benefits of mitigation chart. That study shows that every $1 invested in seismic retrofits saves roughly $3 in response and recovery costs. And retrofitting strategies have been around for a long time. We know how to fix these buildings. We brace the parapets to prevent them from falling outwards, and we can add rosettes or through bolts to connect the walls to the floors, connect the knee bone to the leg bone. The building on the right, on the bottom there, is retrofitted. You can't see any rosettes. So a number of these buildings are historic or landmark structures, and they might have rules about what you can do to the facade. You can retrofit these buildings from the inside out using adhesive anchors. So as I mentioned, all of Washington is seismically active, and URMs are located all across the state. This is a map from the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, and they estimate that Washington State has between 15,000 and 33,000 URMs. That's a lot of brick. That's a lot of people. And right now, Seattle is the only city in Washington State that has fully inventoried their URMs. So that means that all these other communities don't know how many buildings they have that are vulnerable and that might collapse in an earthquake. And spoiler alert, there will be another earthquake, and it will likely be in our lifetime. So Washington Emergency Management, DAP, the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, as well as the Washington Department of Commerce, they're working on developing a statewide inventory, and they've begun work with Everett. They have worked with the city of Tacoma, and they are planning to work with other cities like Spokane and Ellensburg, as well as Bainbridge Island. But Seattle is leading by example here. We have developed an inventory, we have passed legislation regarding retrofits, and we're establishing a process for retrofit that can be implemented by others. Seattle has 1,100 unreinforced masonry buildings, and more than half of them serve our disadvantaged populations. So due to the age of these buildings, they tend to be naturally occurring affordable housing or affordable commercial spaces. And what this means is that if we don't retrofit these buildings and there's an earthquake, our most disadvantaged populations are going to be more significantly impacted. They're going to be the victims. They're going to be displaced. They're going to need sheltering and long-term housing. But it also means that any legislation that the city passes is going to trickle down as increased rents and potential displacement to this population. So it's really complex. And I like to joke that if this were easy, it would have been solved by now. So Seattle, and I say this lovingly, Seattle has been talking about unreinforced masonry retrofits for almost 50 years and how to fix this. And we're finally making progress, but the biggest issue is the cost of these retrofits. And retrofit legislation was actually passed in the 1970s, but it was repealed because building owners were not able to make it cost effective. And what the city has done recently, we celebrated a significant milestone by establishing what we call the alternate method for retrofit. And it's informed by California's Bolts Plus method, if you are familiar with that. But it's essentially a reduced scope of work for retrofits, prioritizing the primary structural deficiencies. So if on the graphic on the left there, you see there's blue all over it, right? So we're strengthening the floors, we're adding new frames. On the right, we're solely connecting the knee bone to the leg bone. So one of the things that we're trying to emphasize is that this is the least amount of structural improvement that reduces the probability of collapse, but it also reduces the risk of, it also reduces the cost. So it's almost a 50% cost savings to do this method. And our intent has kind of been that doing something is better than nothing, right? Because we've been talking about this for 50 years. And are we moving faster than geology? So this standard is currently voluntary. We want to make it mandatory, but we know we don't have political support to do this until there's financial resources in place to help building owners. So I mentioned the city's passed some legislation to establish this minimum standard. We're also working on developing potentially a transfer of development rights program that would allow building owners the ability to sell unused development space to fund their retrofits. But this isn't, I think the key here is that there is no one silver bullet to fund this. So we're also exploring federal funding options. But as many of you are likely aware, the federal funding landscape is a bit uncertain at the moment. We have been successful in the past with receiving FEMA grants for individual buildings, public buildings like libraries. But we're trying to copy the city of Berkeley, California's successful model where they got FEMA funding to create essentially a reimbursement program for retrofits. So a certain percent would be reimbursed. And we just got a grant for the first phase of that, but we're going to need a much larger grant from FEMA to fund the actual reimbursements. And that might not be feasible now. We also have another grant in the works that would be to bring together lenders and insurers using the National Institute of Building Sciences, the Resilience Roadmap Incentivization, something like that. So again, FEMA's been kind of a black box lately to see where our status of grants and things are. But FEMA is really the only federal agency that had a framework to even support this. And even when FEMA was fully funded, 1% of FEMA's mitigation funding went to seismic projects. So I showed that national hazard map of there are 27 high seismic states, but only 1% of our mitigation funding is going to seismic projects. So we've been ignoring this vulnerability for a really long time. The last thing I will look at is what the state is doing. And we've had the opportunity to coordinate with the Washington State Seismic Safety Subcommittee, which includes Washington Emergency Management, the Department of Commerce, and DAP to create a House bill. And this House bill, thank you, Representative Donahue, for co-sponsoring that. And Representative Ryu was a big help on that as well. But what this what this House bill suggests is it would fund the completion of the state's URM inventory. So where are all of these buildings? And that would also conduct a study on feasible tax incentives. So exploring things like modification to the state's special valuation tax, which is also commonly referred to as the state's historic preservation rehab program. we're looking at other things like sales tax, property tax, as well as valuation assessment zones. So this tax incentive study that was proposed, we had a number of supporters for. There's actually 26. I couldn't figure out auto formatting, and there's 2 18s if you're paying very close attention. But the point I wanted to make with this slide is that the list of supporters for this is statewide. We've got Spokane preservation groups, we have Olympia, we have Tacoma, we have Kittitas County, or Kitsap County rather, we have Everett. Everyone is really supportive of solving this issue. And so we were really excited and optimistic with this House bill, and it unfortunately didn't pass this go around. And you know, I get it. Budgets are tight and attention is pulled in every direction, and we have a new governor. And earthquakes just always feel like this someday problem. But the thing is, someday could be tomorrow. It could be during the World Cup, right? Like this is going to happen. And we have another opportunity. The legislative session in 2026 is our chance again to try again to pass this bill. And do you know what else is in early 2026? The 25th anniversary of the Nisqually earthquake. You know, this quake, it damaged the Capitol building. This is downtown Olympia from that earthquake. And we're trying to be smart this time. We are trying to utilize this anniversary as a way to get media attention, to build public awareness, and to get this legislation across the finish line. So I'm going to take 4 minutes of your time to show a video. It's a sizzle reel of a documentary that we've been supporting. And this documentary, I'm so happy, it's not the typical doom and gloom, we're all going to die that the media likes to portray. Instead, it explores why we as the public, as cities, as academics, why do we put off earthquake preparedness? So we'll have a shorter 2-minute call to action video by the end of next month, and we'll want your help spreading that. So let me play this video. And then I'll have one more slide.
The fact is that natural beauty is a product of the geological environment. You can't take them apart from each other. The thing that creates the earthquake and tsunami hazard is the same thing that makes the terrain really beautiful. It's built on it.
When the earthquake happened in this area, the nation will feel the impact simply because of the supply chain of technology, of the businesses that exist, that this is their headquarters. Earthquake science is so young. The theory of things on that wasn't quite given. And so the options, and we still don't even know what all the false
No such thing as a natural disaster, because the disaster part is how it impacts the stuff we build and where we live is the hardest way.
I think it's, and I completely understand that. That overwhelmed too, and I think for a lot of people, the self-defense mechanism is, you know, and I'm gonna pay, although that it's just no.
Nearly 1,000 gallons of beer, 3 feet. It's easy to get wrapped up in the notion that when an earthquake happens, it will just flatten everything. And that's practically not true.
But there are parts of the city that will completely be devastated. And those parts of the city are primarily color. It's a historical thing. Communities were forced to live in these areas that are more prone to disaster.
Engineers hired by the Washington State Department of Natural Resources studied 561 school buildings over the past 4 years. Their report to the Washington legislature gave the lowest possible seismic safety rating to more than 90% of school buildings assessed.
Jackson for you know, a high water mark, a high water mark here, there could be more inundation with sea level rise and other factors. It was not my fault. What honestly
Sorry, I want to make one comment. So Turkey, over 50,000 people died. We're facing something very similar. And we have been very lucky here that we haven't had people have double wet and very lucky. So this is our time window to do something.
So violent swaying faced me with itself. How long did the swaying continue? I should think about 4 to 5 minutes, because we were in effect at the end of the pendulum there. We got swaying in fact longer than we did here on the ground. Were you fighting, Bill? Honestly, you bet.
So here's where you come in. As legislators, as academics, as business industry leaders, as community members, we need your help to support House Bill 1810. Help us spread the message, help us build awareness of the 2001 Nisqually anniversary, February 28th, 2026, and help support the local governments and building owners that are trying to do the right thing before disaster strikes. So my last slide here is just my contact information, and I will ask that let's stop postponing mitigation and let's make Washington a leader in seismic safety and resilience, and let's fix the bricks. Thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. Very nice. Very well done. As a reminder, if you have a question, please submit it through the Whova app and we'll be able to see it here. It's a small group. If you want to just raise your hand and ask that question, we'll get a microphone to you also. So thank you so much. Next, Jennifer Goupil. Thank you, Jennifer.
Very good. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for you people that are still here, your troopers on the last session of the day. We appreciate that very much. So I just wanted to, again, thank Bill for inviting me to this. This is a wonderful opportunity for me as well. Like Evan, I am a structural engineer. That was my training. That was my background, what I went to school for. And in fact, I did live here in Seattle for 10 years and worked at a structural engineering firm. So all of the things that Amanda discussed are also very near and dear to my heart as a design professional, but also as a civil engineer. So I'm going to talk to you today about how codes and standards can improve your community's infrastructure resilience. And I must say, never in my 30 plus years of doing this has anyone introduced the topic of codes as being a delightful endeavor. Usually I get the pushback whenever I'm talking about codes and standards. So yes, I hope you are delighted with what we're talking about today, but really I just hope to share some information to get you thinking about some things. Now I'm going to come at this from the hazard side of the equation. There's a lot of different ways we can slice and dice resilience, but I'm going to come at it from the hazard side in terms of infrastructure resilience. So I just wanted to make that clear as well. So I want you to take a look at this image. I always like to start with a group who may be non-technical in understanding what it is that civil engineers do and who we are. Look at this in terms of your community, your constituents, where you live, or maybe where you grew up. This is civil infrastructure. This is roads, bridges, transport, waterways. You can't see it, but it's in here. All of our electrical grid, our wastewater and our drinking water systems are all in there. The buildings that you see in this image are the buildings where we live, work, and play. This is all the civil infrastructure that engineers design, build, and maintain every day for modern society. As a civil engineer, we also take an oath of ethical obligation when we practice to hold paramount the health, safety, and welfare of the public, and we take that quite seriously. At ASCE, the organization that I work for is a professional society. We're a 501c3. Our bread and butter are design documents, developing things in particular like standards, education, and advocacy for the profession. We have more than 160,000 members worldwide, and we're about 180 countries around the world. So quite a robust organization. Here we go. What I want to talk to you about today are a few things that I hope that you can take with you on your way home and kind of think about it. Again, coming from the lens of the hazard side of the house, and we're talking about infrastructure resilience for your community. Who's doing this work? What are we doing? What are the environmental loads that hazards that we're talking about, and how are they considered? How does it happen? How do they come together? And I want to tell you a good story. I'm going to show you a video too. I didn't know we were going to be the video team up here, but I want to show you a good story and then finally talk about where you fit in, which I think might be helpful for this audience. So the first thing I want to start off with is this captured from a slide that Bill showed you earlier is I think resilience, and especially when you talk about infrastructure resilience, it really is a team sport. It's all hands on deck, and you got to bring out the greatest experts from the greatest pieces of this chain to all work together to be successful. Like a lot of other analogies, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And so I think everybody has a role to play. I'm going to talk to you a lot about where the civil engineers fit into this story. And then hopefully you'll be delighted by our codes and standards process. Whoops. Okay. So ASCE, as I mentioned, we are advocacy. A lot of what we do is advocacy. We do a lot of that based on our policies that we said. You can see this one here was on resilience. It's about 20 years old now, but to focus in really on what it means for us as civil engineers is the resilience is the ability to plan, prepare for, mitigate, and adapt for changing conditions from hazard for a rapid recovery. So in our case, the changing conditions are the environmental hazards, and the rapid recovery would be get people back, live, working, and playing in that civil infrastructure, which, you know, if you think about it, really, that civil infrastructure, the image that I showed you in the beginning, that really is literally the foundation of the economy, right? Because if we can't move people, if we can't move goods, if your building is fine, but the bridge is damaged and you can't get to the buildings, if the bridge is fine, but maybe the home stock is taken out by the hazard, you're still not in a good place. So resilience really means for me, all of those things and all of those hazards. So what I'm challenging my profession to think about as civil engineers and hold true to our code of ethics is to create safe, resilient, and sustainable infrastructure in all that we do and consider the current and anticipated needs of society. I underlined anticipated because that's something that we are really starting to think about as our environmental hazards start changing from the historical record. How are we going to adjust to that? So what I wanted to start with kind of a baseline is what is the design standards and codes work together as the greatest tool in our toolbox really to mitigate against these hazards. The civil engineers and a lot of our partner organizations, our jurisdictions work with us, but those documents really do help you all mitigate how your community infrastructure is going to behave and respond in that next event. Just like Amanda said, we know the problems. The engineering part of this is not the hard part. People are the hard part. Policy is the hard part. Those are the thorny issues we got to get through. We can develop the documents that meet the technical solutions, as Amanda showed you, but getting it on board with all the other competing interests are what is really hard here. But the codes and standards are really our greatest toolbox for doing that. What I'm going to talk a little bit about are the environmental hazard that all of our documents address. And one thing I want you to remember is that those documents are updated mostly on a 5-year schedule, sometimes faster than that, but that is continued maintenance. We don't just one and done and we put it on the shelf and we walk away. These are constantly being updated with all of the, in fact, why don't I just go there? I'm going to tell you all about how they're updated. These processes happen with research that comes primarily, I would say, out of our federal agencies, both in the States and in Canada. It's the same situation. These are the American documents, but it's a very similar process in Canada, where we start with the research and the design data that comes from our agencies. That gets adopted into our design standards, and those get adopted into our codes. That's kind of where the engineering stops. That last piece, that adoption by the local jurisdiction, the adoption and enforcement is what the experts in this room are responsible for. So how you manage, how you do what Amanda just talked about is really in your hands of how you want to prepare your community for what's coming. I want to quickly talk about some of the hazards that are in here. You can see on the, the left-hand side of the screen, these are the design hazards that go into our design standards, either as a building code and or land use management. You can see the Canadian codes up on the top right. The research goes into the code, and the code is adopted by the provinces. Now, the difference is in Canada, they have 18 months to adopt it. In the States, we can deliver the national model code, and it's up to the jurisdiction to adopt it if and when you wish. So it's a little bit more of a patchwork. But I could say that the lovely piece about, maybe this is the lovely piece about codes, is that this forum where you all can kind of share notes and really talk about how these things affect the economic viability of the region is what's really outstanding about this meeting. The hazard doesn't care that there's a national border. The earthquake doesn't care that there's a state line there or a jurisdictional line, right? It's coming no matter what, to kind of echo Amanda. And I want to move forward here. These are the hazards that are generally included in our building codes. Now, I underlined seismic and tsunami because those two hazards, as Amanda pointed out, get a lot of attention. They are well funded. There are groups doing really good work to mitigate against those hazards, but there's a whole laundry list of others that are out there. Personally, right now, I'm on Team Flood, and I'm championing Team Flood all the way to the finish. I'm trying to desperately. For me, if you go to any kind of, unfortunately, when you walk to a downtown and you see these beautiful art installations, and it'll say, this was the 1975 flood, that was the 1980 flood. And it's a beautiful art installation that's well over my head, but it's memorializing what happened to that downtown corridor. Guess what? That's not one and done either. That's coming again. So there's many, many good hardworking people that are thinking about flood mitigation, but I would say these are all of the environmental hazards that we're up against. That future conditions piece that I told you about, the Canadians are well ahead of us. In their 2025 document are provisions that will start thinking about future hazards with these environmental hazards in mind. The American documents are coming along, and in 2030, hopefully we'll have some provisions in there, but those are coming so that you know about it. And then finally, it's a suite of tools, right? So the gold band is a building code and a building code environment. I could also be talking the regulatory environment for bridges or some of our other horizontal assets, kind of a little patchwork on the design and regulatory side as well. And then these green ones are, of course, more of a land management issue, but also coming into very top of mind for communities. So I'm going to stop here for a minute and think about really what can we do to ensure that we are designing and building more resilient infrastructure for our communities. And I can sit here and say, we can engineer it better. Yay, hurrah. Because I can at my vantage point where I'm working with the engineering community to try to ensure that our buildings and our bridges and our water systems are all designed and built to the same level of hazard. I can do that. But then when I pass it along to you as my colleagues, then you have to start thinking about what kind of levels of protection do we want for our communities. So the local adoption and the local enforcement is something that is absolutely critical to this. And I think echoing what Bill said, aligning the costs with the beneficiaries is critical. A lot of these really creative ways to fund and advance some of these things are in your all's jurisdiction, but that's how we're going to win-win. And so with that aspect, I want to tell you about a really good story. I have a video here of the Anchorage earthquake that happened in 2018. And just for anybody who might have experienced that, I just wanted to give you a little forewarning because I don't want to catch you off guard so that you're not surprised by this and bring some of that emotion back. This is a good story, but I just wanted to preface that if anyone might have experienced that. Only 2 minutes.
sitting on my couch when it happened, and got to sit there and watch everything in my kitchen rattle off the countertop and fall on the floor. They could think of that. It was definitely pretty scary sitting in it, but it's not the first earthquake we've had last, so it wasn't anything completely out of order.
One thirty in the morning, I'm on the 10th floor, and the room is shaking violently, so that certainly woke me up. In the bathroom, the water was coming out of the toilet because it was, swirling around from this violent shaking. The door of my closet swung open, and some of the dresser drawers actually swung open. So that kind of gives you a sense of how significant the shake was.
I believe it was the biggest earthquake that hit a suburban US area in over 20 years. We had 0 fatalities and just over 100 injuries. But besides the earthquake, that's pretty remarkable. And that's in large part due to the strength of our building code, the strength of our facilities to withstand such an earthquake.
We all went downstairs with a bunch of engineers, so everybody's assessing the columns and looking at the performance of the hotel that we were in. And it performed exactly as designed, and you can all look to tell about that.
We did not have any significant structural collapse anywhere through that earthquake, which is remarkable.
Certainly that day was a prime example where many lives were saved, including my own, because of the expertise and diligence and hard work and ethical standards and technical and professional standards of civil engineers.
All of the building code works, we know pretty well, but we're having a good amount of data that backs that up.
So that's the good story. That's a nice example of how a community took the tools that were available to them and applied them in a way that made sense for their community. So it wasn't everybody, it was just the subset that they thought was important. Another thing I want to bring to your attention here is ASCE, again, is an education nonprofit. We develop a lot of tools and resources. This is a Pathways to Community Resilience piece that I developed with my government relations team that really speaks to what is the code, what is the standard, how do they work, what are the tools available to you all, so you can access the right documents and or design criteria for your community and your hazard. And then also, I hope that some of you are familiar with the ASCE report card. This is every 4 years, ASCE kind of assesses the health of our nation's infrastructure and assigns a grade. This year we went up to a C, yay, C, but we still have a lot of work to do, obviously. But you can go in a lot of detail, and many of the states do their own report cards as well, and this covers the whole suite of infrastructure, and it's another tool for you all to use, kind of understand what the health is of your infrastructure. So as we're winding down here, I just wanted to offer some best practices, something you could think about on your way home. For one, know your role. Like civil engineers are a part of this solution. As Bill mentioned, we need a lot of players with a lot of deep expertise to understand how to improve our infrastructure for our communities. So know your role in what that is and know your hazard. It's very different. This is we have a national model code, but I can tell you I do code support all across the country. Florida throws out the seismic and they throw out the snow. They obviously don't need those. They're wind and water people down there. You all don't need the, maybe the water piece of the hurricanes, but everything else is very related up here. So you choose the pieces that you really need for your communities. And I would say keep an eye on flood. Flood is the dark swan. It happens all the time and people don't underestimate that hazard. And then really keep in the back of your mind that standards and codes are updated regularly. So it's not a one and done. There should be a process. And I would say kudos to this region. It's one of the models within the nation of adopting on a regular cadence. So again, keep funding those building departments and the other folks who actually look at these and update them regularly. And then, of course, as I said in the video, it really does save lives and save dollars. And this is my last slide. And again, I bring back the image of that community. Really think about what that means for you and your constituents and your community. I hope that you learned something about building codes and standards and what you can take away. Maybe you were delighted, I don't know, but hopefully you still learned a little bit about that and have something to think about on your way home. And with that, I'm going to thank you for your time and attention. You can contact me if you have any further questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Are there any questions for Jennifer while we're loading up the next presentation by any chance? That's great. Was delightful. Thank you. Next, we have Bridget Dooney to talk about the resilience from the insurance perspective.
I'm on the doom and gloom side. I'm just kidding. I won't be on the doom and gloom side. Which one? This one or this one? Okay. Okay. Well, while we're waiting for that, I was going through trying to figure out what to talk to you guys about today. And going through the process, this weird nostalgic memory came back to me. And it seemed pretty poignant and sort of started to drive what I'm going to talk about today. So what it is was 1980, being in second grade with 28 other kids looking out a window, watching Mount St. Helens blow up and thinking with all these 7-year-olds like myself, whoa, that's amazing. And then it was going on a little longer and a little longer, and it became very dark and no one was talking. And their response was, okay, I guess everybody go home. I walk home, and the whole way home, I thought, oh my God, what's going to happen to us? Is it going to come here? Is something going to, I mean, here we knew it was bubbling and burping and doing all kinds of things, and we're watching it on the news, and then it happens. And we were kids. We didn't even know what to do in case of an earthquake or where to go, and so insurance has tended to be very reactive. It's tended to always just, it's been traditional. You pay me, something happens, I'll take care of you. But realistically, with the things that are happening today, we really need to consider partnership, allies, and being very proactive in how we're going about some of these things, because so much could happen very instantaneously, and we're all just sort of waiting around to react. So going through some of these things, I was going to try and give you some data from the 2024 data. We, as an insurance agency and insurance carriers, we were a little excited in 2024. Things started to turn around. They looked pretty good. 60 billion in estimated global losses. That was pretty good by the half of the year. And things were starting to go down a little bit. And we were starting to see a little bit of relief for all of our customers and our clients. But by 2024, the global insured catastrophe losses were 100 billion, again, for the fourth time, 4 years in a row. So again, it's burping and it's burbling, and we know it's right there. We know it's going to happen, but we're just reacting to it. So then I started to think, well, God, we talk about billions, we talk about trillions. Back in my 7th grade self was talking about cajillions. I don't think that's a word, but we may need to put it into the English dictionary sooner than later. But more than 8 million acres being on fire in 10 states in November in 2024. 8 million acres, that's madness, crossing 10 states. I mean, and 1 million of them being in Texas. And If it wasn't on fire, it was underwater. And as it was said earlier, well, maybe you don't need to worry so much about certain things in Florida, but if Florida gets hit twice in the same week with a hurricane, you better worry about whether you're going to be underwater in Georgia or South Carolina. So we're all in it together. If something impacts somebody in Seattle or in Washington, it's going to impact the people in Oregon and in Idaho and probably in Canada. And so then, you keep going and you think, oh God, the Palisades in Los Angeles, we were told 22 billion to 54 billion. Well, UCLA Anderson forecasts it's probably closer to 164 million. So when we're talking about, or billion, but when we're talking about the losses, we don't really even know what those costs are. We're being so conservative, and these are property costs. This isn't even beginning to scratch the surface at what the health costs are going to be with Harvard and UCLA and UC Davis in Texas looking at those and trying to provide immediate information as to what the health costs currently are. There will be bigger health costs going forward. This doesn't really take into account the pollution costs either and what we're going to be seeing. So what did we do? We reacted. That was our response. We decided as insurance people, we did what we always do. Market capacities changed, availability shifted, and the people who were really hit pretty hard, we tried to do things by sharing and layering policies and doing, you take a little and you take a little. We tried to do pooling. But realistically, we took away the one peril that was going to be covered, wildfires. We put higher deductibles on people. We put higher premiums on people. And the people who got hit were really the people who needed us the worst. So what do you do? So I wanted to talk about proactive versus reactive. And I think we've figured out by now, proactive or reactive is pretty much traditional. It's going to be just you pay your premiums. And if it's covered in the policy, we'll pay you back. But there isn't a lot of effort in or reasonable individual effort or reason to make some of those changes. But when you're talking about a preventative focus and you're talking about looking at data, and that really is what the insurance industry has tried to do is say, we used to be this way and we do still have to be that way because we have loss adjustments and we have loss expenses that we have to account for. And that's always going to be there. But now we need to start partnering with different companies, different construction groups that are deciding that they're going to make more impermeable siding, or different groups that are willing to do sensors or willing to do telematics. They've been doing this since 2008. They've been trying and trying and trying. And the community has said, no, you're just doing it to get more money out of us. We got to work on our reputation. But as a holistic group, we need to share. We need to share data, we need to collect data, and we need to kind of break the old standards and start again and start scrubbing that data for quality information so that we can know either we got to get people out of this area soon, we have to help retrograde some things to make sure that it's a safer environment. And the only way we can do that is we are offering incentives right now. We are offering, hey, if you guys use this particular type of water sensor in your brand new building, we'll give you a discount on your insurance. If you're willing to do some of these things, we'll go ahead and we'll try and work with you on that. And also, we have insurance carriers right now that aren't really willing to work with anybody who's not collecting data, who's not working with sensors, because they are beating everybody out as far as pricing the ability to do coverage, because they've got this data to actually pre-underwrite in a way and isolate their underwriting. And what I mean by that is being able to actually tell the people who drive too fast, you're going to get charged more, not the person whose telematics are coming back saying they're a very safe driver, but the person who's not taking care, that person should be paying more. People have been telling us that for years. We didn't have the capability to do it. Now we do. So people who are upgrading, people who are putting sensors on, We heard you and we're working on it, but we need good allies. So, I mean, I know we're kind of hitting the end of things, and so I'll try and rush through as much as I can. These are some of the ways that insurance has been doing monitoring things, the drones, the ways that we're able to actually take better pictures. We're actually able to get claims adjusted faster because of some of these detection materials, and because of some of these monitoring devices, we're able to, on our, at least on our construction sites, when people are wearing helmets that have monitoring devices, we've been able to impact their lives by being able to say, hey, your heart rate's going up. You've been working too hard. These people are getting too hot. Whatever's happening, we're able to manage better, safer construction sites and building sites. That means that people are paying better attention to the quality of work. Those buildings get built faster, better. So we need allies, and I think you all know that's where you guys come in. You know, we have a lot of groups that are all working together like this. This is really important, and we have them on a global level. And a lot of you, if you are aware of the United Nations Environmental Program and the G20 meeting in Italy, where a lot of bankers and investment people and insurance carriers came together to try and talk about some of the environmental exposures and how to issue, you know, how do we even address that? You may also know a lot of carriers walked out of that meeting. That's okay. If it's not working, it's okay, but it has to work. So then something else has to happen. And we keep looking at things and saying, well, it's not working. We're just going to stop. It can't stop. We know what, if it's failed, walk away from it, go to something new, but we need to keep coming together. We all need to keep talking, because these things are going to happen, and they're happening on such a massive scale. Me remembering Mount St. Helens, I mean, I barely ever remembered anything after that, that happened to anybody after the very, very big punctuations in my life, maybe, but not every single year, not to where it was just becoming, yeah, that's just going to happen. Moreover, we need help in changing building codes and things like that, because insurance doesn't want to build matchboxes in fire zones. So yes, we'd love to go ahead and insure areas that with more impermeable building materials, but it's like the Three Little Pigs. We don't want to put up straw houses in a windy zone. We don't want to put up matchbooks in a fire zone. And, we don't want to put things underground that are going to be underwater. So those types of things, if we can start helping the communities with, here are some incentives. Don't just buy don't reside, buy better siding that's going to be more secure. Don't just do this, buy the actual thing that has the sensors. Here's some tax incentives. Here's some product incentives. Those things will make changes, and people will get behind them. I also think media is one area that we haven't really talked about, that I've heard so far, that media will make a big change as far as if they support it and they're telling you, hey, this is the right way to go. Education, media, finance, the builders and government, those things all need to come together and be proactive. That said, we can't just leave it up to global communities. We need regional communities. We need local communities. Hell, we need counties, cities, families, whoever, individuals. It has to be a group effort as far as being proactive. Otherwise, these costs just keep skyrocketing. We're just putting fires out and fires out and fires out. And the restrictive nature of carriers, lots are backing out, the money isn't in it. So it's the amount of insurance that's out there is dwindling. And so in order to create a better swell of those communities and more trust in those investors, to make that happen, we need to show that there's a new way to do it. For my part, we also, USI partners with a lot of building exchange communities too, as well as government exchange communities. So we work with AGC, we work with NUCA, in my construction industry. We work with the CFMA to try and find ways to keep abreast of and keep the education out there as far as what new building materials are available and what new, and how we can ensure those things better. My industry is continuously going out and investing in technology as well to see if we can't have partners that can better support some of those insurance programs. So we are able to work with a unique group of insurance carriers that actually are impacted, like implementing these types of procedures, but then also doing very well and are very successful at it. So I guess I know everybody's getting tired. So I would say, you know, we need to talk about individual accountability. We all each need to agree that if this is where we're going, we need to talk about it. We need to get out in the community and talk about it, be proactive, become part of communities that are proactive. The community engagement is going to be a huge thing. If people see insurance carriers going out there and insurance agencies going out there and promoting this type of thing, and supporting building groups that are supporting this type of thing, it'll catch on. Technology integration, I think that's already coming. And then, you know, the policy changes that shift towards a green infrastructure that we can all make on our end, but also from a governmental end, is going to absolutely fast track our ability to go forward. And it's all about being a good partner, and being a helpful ally. All I would say is be transparent. We need to share our means and methods. That's one thing that my industry has not been good about. They've sort of hoarded their claims information or their data. We're starting to share quite a bit of that and try and show people, here's how. This is why your rates are the way your rates are. This is why your building is the way your building is. We will help you if you implement some of these things, and we will change the way that you're paying for that product. Be committed. Like I said, it's okay to go ahead and fall down a little bit and be like, yeah, this isn't for me, but find whatever it is for you, or whatever way your individual group or your company can go and be a part of it and be supportive. We need to start establishing and allocating funding ways to fund this, because people are not made of money right now. And so if they just have to replace something, they're not going to replace it with the most sustainable or impermeable product and do no harm. So I think we all know it's pretty all over the place. Let's not go backwards. Let's not try and vote against things. Let's not try and, you know, sneak one by on our end a little bit on the risk side. We will try and be like, hey, we'll put in a much less expensive policy that maybe doesn't have the coverage that you need. We need to be transparent about that too. And we need to make sure that we're on the up and providing things today. That's all I got for you, folks. I really tried to get through that.
That's
quickly.
great.
I know we're a little far.
Thank you,
on it.
Bridget. Thank you so much. You mentioned the word incentive, and Amanda mentioned the word incentive. And I think that's going to be a key to figure out how we spread this cost of resilience across the necessary stakeholders. Question, please.
Oh, yeah.
Explain, if you can, what is the back and forth process? So if you can explain what is the back and forth process. So as Amanda was describing, they had something, they brought it to the legislature, they thought it was going to get passed. It failed at the last line. So I would think on the underwriter side, they would have been pushing hard, lobbying to help that go through, because it improves your risk control. So
Yeah, you put very hard that to go through. And on the construction partner side, at least in my area, the agencies are very political. They support certain bills. They certainly supported retrofitting. I mean, they're obviously like, we want this to happen. So, you know, I mean, bills don't pass because of money sometimes. I mean, you know, it sounds great. Everything would be great to have that, but now it needs to go here. And that's just so, and your community. right? I mean, there are lots of, so I right now in my home invite 30 people to come over every time that we're voting. And each one is from a different, some of us are insurance people, some of us are in the education field, and everybody brings their opinion to the table because things like that get kind of swept where you'll see an opinion and you'll go, well, I agree with that. Well, that's not necessarily true. It's so important that that happens. People don't know the impact of what Amanda's talking about isn't quite being brought to the public, right? It's a very, very whitewashed version of that. So the public thinks, yeah, we're pretty good. Nobody leave us in a situation where we're not safe. You're not safe. I mean, you're not safe. So yeah, we are, one of the things Molly and I both work together. One of the things we both sit on a lot of committees. We both try and get out there to the community that we service and really try and give a risk management perspective, or at least lend our expertise or find that expertise for those groups to bring in maybe a speaker that fits whatever their issue is at that time. But until this message gets out there, people are going, it's natural to feel like it's It's natural to feel like, yeah, I've never changed my tires, but they haven't popped yet. It's like, well, one's gonna pop, you know, I mean, it's natural.
Yep.
So.
Sure.
Oh, you're right.
In the case of the bill that we were talking about, that was actually money. And it was specifically money because there was a section that would have our Department of Commerce do a study to identify the best ways of incentivizing private business owners or private building owners to be willing to take that step to actually try to address the seismic hazards in their buildings. And so it was actually the cost of the study that seemed to be the big issue. Because this year we were in a pretty big deficit, and it's going to be continuing for a while. So that was where the wall came up. And unfortunately, the way we do it, it's not a situation where you have the same people making those determinations as to whether or not something should be paid for, as to whether or not it's viable policy.
And the cost of that study was $400,000.
Great. Thank you. We have one more presentation. I would like to ask you if you could hang over for another 5 or so minutes so that we can get Evan to make the presentation he's making. Evan, I'm going to go ahead and advance the slides. If you can hear me, I'm on your first slide.
No, let's jump to slide 6. I guess I only have about 3 minutes, so we're going to jump to slide 6 if you wouldn't mind.
Stop me. Is this it?
Nope, keep going. Keep going. Okay, there. So, you know what the previous speakers have spoken about is that there are codes that are used to design buildings to make them safe. There are efforts to bring older buildings and very hazardous buildings into some level of compliance with safety, not necessarily bringing them up to current code, but certainly making them a lot safer than they are. But moving forward, we need to think beyond just a minimum level of performance. Certainly for a 100-year-old unreinforced masonry building, that may be what the best we can do. And codes certainly provide a baseline point for making buildings safe so people can get out of them. But when it comes to the cost of disasters, neither of those really dramatically reduce the cost to a community of a disaster in terms of damage, in terms of recovery time, in terms of impacts on the sustainability and resilience of a community. And so the U.S. Resiliency Council, our mission is to demonstrate that we can build more resiliently when we look at resilience across the spectrum, safety, of reducing cost, the cost of damage, and improving recovery time, which is really truly what resilience is all about, recovery and getting back to business as usual. And that can be done for a very low cost. The typical cost to build a building to minimum code versus one that is resilient and will not only survive the earthquake, but be able to be functional and repairable is on the order of 0 to 2% of the construction cost. Most people don't really know that, but it's demonstrated through many projects that have been done around certainly the West Coast. And so we want to see a movement from code-based design to resilience-based design. And so if you jump ahead to slide 9, the USRC has developed rating systems for earthquake, for wind. We're hoping to be able to develop a rating system for flood and earthquake. And given that there is a great amount of science and engineering out there, much of it has come from the ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers. The work that that group has produced in looking even just beyond sort of, again, what's required for code, but different measures of resilience, shows us that we can tune performance to what we want. By a proper choice of materials, by a proper choice of structural systems, by good engineering. And when you can take good design and turn it into a quantifiable number of how much that is going to reduce the risk to a lender or an insurer, or how much is it going to reduce the risk of losing property taxes or sales revenue to a city, then you get to the point where I think we ultimately need to be, and quickly, and that is the next slide. That is incentivization. We cannot count, and Amanda talked about this, we cannot count on owners, even if the cost is small, and it's not actually particularly small in retrofit, but we can't count on owners, nor should we expect owners to shoulder the full burden of investing in resilience. Why? Because it benefits everybody. When a building owner builds more resiliently, it reduces the insurance company's costs. It reduces the lender's risk of having to get a property in foreclosure. It makes the community more stable so that their tax base is more stable, so that their credit rating is more stable. All these other groups and more benefit when a building is built resiliently. And so it's past time that all of those other groups try to force the issue upon the building owner by saying, you either build your building better, or we don't insure you, or we don't give you a loan, or we're not going to require you to retrofit your building because we know it's too expensive for you. It's time for all of the groups that receive a benefit for resilient design to come together and start making policies internally in their businesses and through through jurisdictions to help that owner make that jump, make that decision that I'm going to retrofit my building, or I'm going to build my building more resiliently. And what the U.S. Resiliency Council's mission is to take everything that these folks have talked about, and commented on, and say, we already have the science and engineering here to turn that into reality. It's not just aspirational. It's not just a good idea. We can put numbers to it, so that the actuaries at the insurance companies can go back and see how much benefit they get when somebody designs resilience. A lender can see how much lower risk they have of being saddled with a foreclosed property. So that's really how I hope the USRC brings together all of these, synergistic goals that the rest of the speakers have spoken about, but really, and each of the speakers has said this, it comes down to the rest of you. It's past time, far past time, as we see billion-dollar disasters and $100 billion years of losses almost every year now. It's time to step up and make this a reality, because we just we've reached that point. We've reached that point where it's happening every year, and we really have no choice. So that, sorry to turn 15 minutes into 4, but that's what I had to do.
Great. Thank you, Evan. And any questions whatsoever so far right now? I'd like to thank you all for staying with us and coming and watching the presentation today. I also would like to thank our speakers very much. And we'll communicate through Penward, through Brandon, our next steps. And as we move the opportunity to join these stakeholder lists, we'll get that out through the Penward emails and things. So thank you so much. Appreciate it very much. Have a nice evening and enjoy your rest of your summit.